My friendly hello! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peters, and now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you. We're going to be joined in segment number 2 by one of our good friends, Max Barr. He does such great work over at Southeastern 16. This is his first time coming on this podcast. You've heard Blake Lovell from Southeastern 16 so many times. He's his main partner in crime, so this is going to be a lot of fun with Max. He does a tremendous job with his off-season yearly sort of project. He does visual depth charts for all the power conference teams. We're going to talk about how that all got started. We're going to talk about all the nooks and crannies there. We obviously have to talk about Dusty May and the fact that he leaves the Michigan Wolverines for the Dallas Mavericks, what that means for them. Could we see a few of those Michigan Wolverines enter the transfer portal? As of right now, during this Wednesday night, right around about 10:30 p.m. Pacific time, have not seen any of those guys enter into the transfer portal, but we shall see on that front. We have to talk about the outlook of the SEC, what to expect from the likes of Texas A&M, Kentucky, the LSU situation, and we're going to have a lot of fun diving in on a few sleeper teams as well. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, we have one of two ways we fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, learn CM, they mean does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I do beg of you, I do plead with you, please do send in those Twitter/X questions. Lets me know what you want to hear on this podcast, and I could get you best set for the upcoming season. Be mindful that you got a conference preview yesterday out there in the Big South. I plan on doing the Big West here within the next 24 to 48 hours as well. We're chewing through those. You're going to get a conference preview for all 32 conferences, and when we get back in season, obviously, picks and analysis on every single game, every single day, but want to do my best to get you set for what I hope to be the greatest college basketball season ever, and that involves getting on so many great guests. This will be Max's first time on the podcast, and I'm very excited to have him on because I know that he's been doing some great work this offseason over at Southeastern 16, so much more, and you're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at his first name Max, last name Barr, B-A-R-R, so double R there, and then CBB altogether. And Max, pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Greg. I'm excited.
I am as well, and Max, I know that our good friend Blake Lovell over there at Southeastern 16 has joined us so much, so it's great to have you aboard today. And before we dive in on some SEC hoops and what you're all doing in terms of taking a look at depth charts for the upcoming college basketball season, the big news this week, Dusty May, he leaves Michigan and he goes on over to the Dallas Mavericks. What do you expect from Michigan moving forward? Because it feels like they're in a precarious spot with the fact that these guys can enter into the transfer portal if they'd like. I just question if any teams might have roster spots for any of these Michigan players that might want to enter into the portal.
Yeah, Greg, it certainly was a nice late June shakeup to the college basketball news space as things usually die down around this time. Not so much Dusty May shaking things up there. The conversation around what happens with this roster, what happens to Michigan, it's a multi-piece conversation here in terms of, you had reports of John Shire being asked to be the Mavericks coach, but him giving a response of kind of like, guys, I've already started this thing with my guys. I'm on to this next year. We're already practicing. So in terms of what happens with this roster, you have some teams, Greg, out there that, man, they could really use a piece and they may have a chunk of change left over to try to poach one of these, maybe a JP Estrella or a Mustafa Cham or one of these big guys, or, one of the young, not young, but I mean, McKinney's still young, Cadeau, one of the older guys back there, but you have some teams that have a chunk of change left, and then you have other teams that it seems like they don't have a single roster spot open and they have no money left over. So I really think that less is going to happen than people think, but I don't know. Maybe we get one or two moves.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to take a look at. And Mike Boynton, he is currently the interim coach for Michigan. What are expectations for him and perhaps a coaching search coming up? Because for Boynton, I know that so many people in the sport always talk about how hard he works and how good of a coach he was. But as we know with Oklahoma State, even though there's a lot of glowing praise for what he is as a coach, he just really fell short over at Oklahoma State with his lone NCAA tournament appearance coming when Cade Cunningham was on the roster. And even then, I would argue that they fell short of expectations.
Yeah, definitely. And when you're getting the sentiment from the Michigan diehards, their initial reaction to all this, a lot of the positivity coming from this announcement is really more roster than it is coach in terms of just have Boynton take over, keep the retention as high as it can possibly be through this transition, and then the real stuff, the real, head coaching long-term search can really take place over the course of the year and transition into that phase next offseason. The Michigan fans I've talked to, Greg, are kind of more focused, their positivity and their reactions towards the roster retention or the potential of what the retention could look like.
Yep, absolutely. As Max Barr, he does such a tremendous job over at Southeastern 16 with our good friend Blake Lovell. He is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, and no question about it, it is going to be interesting to see what Michigan is able to provide moving forward. And I know you're going to be updating this with regards to something that you've been doing here in the offseason. You've got a big, giant Google Doc that is pinned up on your Twitter/X feed. And for those that don't know that, that would be Max Barr CBB altogether. And I just want you to take us through this and how you've all been coming about this, what sort of was the lead in terms of being able to build this depth chart, and how far along you are of it, because I do conference preview podcasts here and I'm doing my best to get set for the upcoming season. And I think you're finding out as well as I am, 366 teams, it's just a lot of work.
It is, and this is a multi-year project. This is year 2 here. I started last year, and the initial goal of the project was to connect fans to their teams more. It feels like in the climate of college basketball that the diehard fan has the toughest time ever just learning who are my guys, who am I riding for from November through April, hopefully. And it gets so hard with the transfer portal, just reading names off teams. Here's this transfer from UT Martin. He'll be at the 4 for us with a transfer from Fairfield. We'll be backing him up. And it's like, I don't know who these guys are until I watch them for a few games in November. Well, that's why I did the visual depth charts to try to just get a feel for the personality of the team and who you're really going to be rooting for. And then it's kind of just evolved into this power conference off-season portal tracker that I work in conjunction with the Trilly Donovan Discord that I bet college basketball diehards are familiar with or have heard in some way. And I go into the different fan Discord channels and I check with them. Hey fellas, I'm working on this project. What would your suggestions be? What have your beat writers been saying about practice notes? They're not a perfect science. There's definitely going to be a depth chart or two where everybody disagrees with where a guy is placed, but I try to get them as accurate as the fans want their own teams to look, and it kind of just has evolved into this big project.
Oh, that is an amazing project. And the fact that you're able to add a little bit of visual to there, it does help out as well because you're able to see numbers on a paper, what have you. But just actually knowing the face of the guy, it's like, oh, I think I saw him in some sort of a buy game a little bit earlier as well, which I love that. And obviously your main beat is with the Southeastern Conference. And just how do you take a look at this conference? Because I've been mentioning this on the podcast. It really feels like they want to get back to either where they were 2 seasons ago or even exceed that, because last year for almost any other conference, it would have been considered a really good year. But we remember what happened 2 seasons ago when Florida made the title game, Auburn made the Final Four. And I would argue that after a little bit of a down year last year, like all these teams, even a team like South Carolina, they are all in on college basketball this offseason.
Yeah, it really does have a different feel to it than last offseason, where last offseason, as we're running through the portal trackers and we're seeing the Big Ten just make move after move. We're seeing St. John's reload and Duke reload. And, oh, geez, is Virginia going to be back with the coaching change? And now they've got all these internationals. And you start to have the sentiment, well, at least between Blake and I, it was, guys, we're going to be a good conference, but this is now we're talking 2 years ago. That year was something special, the Florida national title year. And so probably going to take a step back. Whereas this offseason, I really feel like when you're breaking down, who's going to be back on top, it's really a conversation that comes down to the cream of the crop of the Big Ten and the SEC kind of duking it out for the top spot there. I definitely have a bit more confidence in the league this year than I did last year, but I don't know if we can quite reach those historic numbers of 2 years ago.
Yeah, trying to reach the historic numbers of 2 years ago is going to be very, very difficult. But how do you take a look at a little bit more of the middle of the conference? Because I certainly think that Florida is that top team, not just in the SEC, but in all of college basketball. But I think the real intrigue comes into what we get out of Vanderbilt with Tanner Thomas coming with Tyler Tanner coming back. I thought that was big. Alabama, I think, is an interesting team. And then you're number two under a guy like a Stephen Pearl. It was rough for him in year one, but he's got some roster retention. I think that those are all very fascinating teams and could be really sort of what makes or breaks the SEC trying to be able to get back to those levels of 2 seasons ago.
Greg, I think the middle of the conference is. I'm glad you brought it up right away because I've just started to try to do my way too early preseason rankings, just kind of putting teams into tiers of where I think I might want to rank them preseason based on expectations and whatnot. And you really have this group, like you said, Florida definitely up there at the top. But then after that, you really have this group of a solid. It could honestly, I could hear you out for a potential 9 or 10 teams that could all kind of fluctuate based on if different things fall different ways. You mentioned in Auburn that is reloaded with two, not just one, but two 7-footers, and Owen Freeman not being one of those. You have a Texas A&M, who I know you're fairly high on, but who we can finally see the full potential of a Mackenzie Mbacco with the lights out scoring of a PJ Haggerty and a uber efficient Jalen Reese potentially. But then like a Missouri, Greg, you're looking at front courts in this league, right? It's kind of the era of going double big in college basketball. I mean, Missouri's got about 5 different guys that could either qualify as a center or stand 6'10" or taller. Like the middle of this league really has a lot of pieces, and we haven't even mentioned the Will Wade, chaotic affair that's going on there. If they get eligibility granted, they're an uber talented team. The middle is deep this year, Greg.
Yep, it really is. And even a team like a Missouri, I think, is going to be intriguing as well because they bring in some pieces via the transfer portal, but they really have a nice class that's going to be coming in as well. And I'm so glad that you brought it up because perhaps the most difficult team to peg in all of college basketball right now is LSU. How about if we dive in on that with our good friend Max on the flip side and initially take a look at a few other SEC teams of intrigue. I certainly want to get his thoughts on Texas A&M and perhaps a sleeper team or two that maybe isn't getting the love that they deserve. That's up next. Here you are on Coast to Coast with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Great to be rejoined by our guy, Max Barr. He does great work over at Southeastern 16. You've heard Blake Lovell on the podcast so much. He's really the main man with them over there. Max is doing an amazing job looking at all things college basketball right now. You're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at his first and last name, Max Barr. That is 2 R's on Barr, the letter CBB altogether. And we've been taking a look at a lot of the, shall we say, middle of the road teams in the SEC. And we left off in the last segment talking about LSU. And that's a great springboard for this segment because with LSU, as we know, it's a very, very intriguing roster, to say the least, where nobody knows who's going to be eligible for this team. And I want to get your thoughts just on how you're taking a look at this LSU team right now, who you think might be eligible, and just in general, what can we maybe expect out of year number one, out of Will Wade, because he's certainly rolled a lot of dice with regards to this offseason.
Yeah, so I talked with beat writer TJ Brown. He's kind of my main go-to guy for information at LSU. They said, and he said, in terms of the international guys and who is expected to be a part of the plans, everyone that has come in that's international is expected to be a part of the plan, except the point guard Yam Madar, the 25 or 26-year-old Israeli point guard who can really shoot the rock. He is not They're not expecting to have him. They're not expecting to have RJ Lewis either. So Bryce Desire, the center, he should be a top five big man in the league potentially, based on my conversations with Armin Jovic. Really likes Desire. His backups, Ruzic and Santos, and Saliu Niang, the 6'7" Italian. They are all as far as what I've heard from the LSU staff, expecting to have those guys. Still, though, with plenty of work to do, probably only have about a 6 or 7 man rotation right now.
Yep, absolutely. And it's going to be very, very interesting to see what happens in the coming days, coming weeks, coming months with them. And I think that they're a big team of intrigue out there in the SEC. And then the one team that I also think is a little bit of a wild card is Texas A&M, because they bring in a big time guy in PJ Haggerty, who is averaging 20 plus points per game. But with Texas A&M, as we know, is much more of a whole is greater than some of its parts approach with this team last season. What are you sort of expecting out of them? Because Bucky McMillan's style typically is absent around like one or two main dominant guys. It's just around a collective that really works as one. And I do think that's going to be interesting how he implements Haggerty into it.
I mean, pretty much, Greg, with every team that Haggerty moves to, because that's a trend of the offseason, that becomes a question. How does he fit? How do the players fit around him? I think this team fits fairly well in regards to Jalen Reese, very uber efficient guard, doesn't need the ball in his hands a ton, and Tyshawn Archie, very nice assist rate there at McNeese. Now, it's depending on where you look or who you talk to, different opinions on how Bucky's going to roll this thing out there. We do know he's going to, play a lot of guys with that press, but in terms of that backcourt there, I think that he's going to go Jalen Shelley, the Loyola Marymount transfer, playing the primary allotted minutes at the three, just because if they do plan on playing Clements and Mbako at the 4 and 5, or even Cade Phillips coming off the season-ending injury, none of those guys have really high rebounding rates like Rashawn Agee did that were ranking tops of the league. And so to make up for that lack of rebounding, Jalen Shelley, standing at 6'8", actually has a really high defensive rebounding rate for a wing. So I think they kind of go a little bit bigger to make up for, you don't have AG pulling down those boards this year, and then just kind of play a little two-man guard game with Haggerty, and whether that's Reese or Archie primarily, most of the minutes, we'll see how that shakes out.
Yep, we certainly will. And with that Texas A&M team, they were really good in terms of being able to guard away from home last season as well. I think that that's going to be so critical. And I think that that's going to be an interesting just sort of point here in the SEC as well, because it feels like the defense is haves and have-nots, to say the least. There's just so many styles in the SEC. And have you noticed here in the offseason a few teams trying to be able to change your ways? Because I think the most notable one is Tennessee, where this just doesn't feel like a Rick Barnes roster, but boy, oh boy, does it have firepower.
It really does. And that's kind of a lot of the league this year. Like with Tennessee, they have, I just did the numbers on three-pointers coming into the league this year. This year's team from last year made 373 threes. Now, it helps to have Tyler Lumblade that made over 100, but they also had two different guys make over 80 with Terrence Hill and Juke Harris. Three different players last year in college basketball playing for Tennessee next year made over 83s. They're the only team in the league that can say that. And so I do have a little bit of question about the depth of the front court. I don't think we're going to be seeing much of the double big that we saw last year. If we do, I think they've got to be very careful about Dwayne Brown and Miles Rubin's foul trouble, because I do have a little bit of questions, Greg, about the front court depth.
Yep, I do as well. I do think that it's going to be intriguing to take a look at them and what they're going to be able to provide moving forward. And I do want to wrap it up with this. In terms of just what we're seeing on the landscape of college basketball, as we know, there's a lot of teams of intrigue, there's a lot of teams of question mark, but when you've been doing your research, when you've been diving into those rosters, it could be from the SEC, the Big Ten, it could be from a mid-major, it's dealer's choice here. It's just all across college basketball. Is there a team or two that you just take a look at them, you're pretty impressed by what they have coming back, / they signed in the offseason, and they're just not getting the love that they necessarily deserve?
It's going to sound like I'm just playing up to a big fan base, but trust me when I tell you I'm not, because last year I was very down on them in the offseason, and I caught a load of slack for it, Greg, a load of slack. This year, I'm very high on them, opposed to consensus, and that's Kentucky. And the reason why I'm higher on them opposed to consensus is because of their center depth. I think when you look at backup centers, if you can look at them across all Power 5 conference. There's a few really solid backup centers, and not many have played more basketball or have better rebounding and rim protection numbers than Frank Kepnang. I mean, you have a 7-foot, seventh-year college basketball player backing up Malachi Moreno. That's 40 minutes of guaranteed quality rebounding and rim protection at the 5. And they might be the only team in the SEC and one of the only teams in college basketball that can truly say, doesn't really matter if it's our 1 or 2 out there. We have a very solid 5-man. And I think just with how college basketball is translating to bigger and bigger play, more and more focus on offensive rebounding and whatnot, I think Kentucky's being underrated. I really like their size.
Yep, and with Kentucky, it was big that they got Milan in there. If they didn't get Milan in there, I probably would not be in on the scene because I was seeing a lot of role players. Like, it's nice that you have Zoom Diallo and guys like that, but they really needed Milan to be able to come in there. Now I'm right there with you. I'm feeling much higher about them. And where would you say that you probably think that they finished in the SEC? Because I think with Milan in there, I certainly don't think that they're on par with Florida. I think that would be a little bit far-fetched, but I still have them right now like number 5, number 6 in the SEC personally.
Yeah, I keep swapping a few teams. I'd say like the Tennessee, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, Arkansas, and Alabama group. I have Florida and Texas, I think, just a tad. I have Texas just a tad ahead. I really like their retention in their portal haul and what they have going on, but I could even slide them down. But really, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, Tennessee, Arkansas, and Alabama, all of them I could ask a question or two for, and all of them I could have a reason why they could finish second or third.
Absolutely. And I do think that it's going to be interesting to see what we get here the rest of the offseason in the SEC in general. And Max, you're doing a great job with our good friend Blake Lovell over at Southeastern 16. I mentioned it over there on your Twitter/X feed. Doing a great job with your visual depth charts and so much more. So love the good people at home. Know it's all on tap for you, and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Oh, thanks so much, Greg. It's been an honor. I've watched and listened to your podcast for about 3 or 4 years now. So this has been a pleasure. Super stoked that you had me on here.
Absolutely. It was great to be able to get Max aboard. He joined me for the first time. Certainly won't be the last. Doing great work in college basketball. So big thanks to Max for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. And if you do like what you're hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have 1 or 2 ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter. So, as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way, that is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. A little bit of a heads up, expect the Big West Conference preview here in the next 2-3 days. Might even be able to get that up tomorrow. I'm trying to work my way through all these conference preview podcasts. We've already got 4 in the books, and every one of them, all 32, are going to get a specialized conference preview because I want this 2026-27 college basketball season to be the most profitable ever. We're on over 2,400 straight days without a missed podcast. That is not going to be ending. And then once we get in season picks and analysis on every single game, every single day. So I appreciate you tuning in today, and I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.